Last Sunday, before I came out to talk, Matt and I just got in a conversation about the topic of what I was going to discuss that morning. I said, this would be really interesting for us to have that conversation with everyone else. So we decided to give it a shot. Now, this might be terrible.
That's okay. We'll live with it.
It might be hilarious, which is possible. I'm hopeful that we'll all learn something. So we're going to have a conversation about this third week of Can't Wait to Be King. Now, before I do, my small group, I've made fun of them every week I've been up here.
That's good. I'm sure they love that.
They insisted I say something nice about them this week.
Can he do that?
No, I can.
Okay, good.
This past Wednesday night, my wife Jennifer had kind of a medical thing, and I had to rush her home right before group started. So I was late to group, and my regular job, it was a crazy day. So I was on my phone during group reading questions because we talk about the message from the week before, and I was reading questions, answering questions, and also chatting with a couple guys in India that were solving a software problem that my company was having, multitasking, and they were incredibly gracious, kind, did not criticize. They did make fun, but they did not criticize me. So I'm thankful for my small group. If you're not in a small group, please scan the QR code in front of you, click Next Steps, Groups, join a group.
Absolutely. And our groups are really great about being flexible to life, because our community group, my wife and I are getting ready to start a new community group, and we were supposed to have our first meeting on Friday night. And then
we should have done that then.
We had no power.
So?
We could have met
Jesus
in the dark.
didn't have power.
Fine. One of our group, that's...
Well, he didn't, did he?
I'm pretty sure Jesus had a lot of power, actually. So,
he didn't have electricity, though.
Still has a lot of power.
Okay.
If you're not, but
all right. That's a good point.
Somebody in our group was losing shingles off their roof, and somebody else, a tree fell through their shed. So we just didn't have group, but you try to rally around and help each other out, right? So people helped us and got us a generator.
That's awesome.
Stuff happens. So join a group.
Very cool.
Have a community around you. You need it. It's great.
Yeah. All right. We are in week 3 of Can't Wait to Be King. We talked about this in the beginning. We kind of established the concept that as humans, we want to be in control, right? It started in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, and when Satan is tempting Eve to eat of the fruit, he says to her, eat this and you'll be like God. And ever since, we've wanted to be like God. We've wanted to be king. We want to be in control of our lives. And if that doesn't apply to you, okay, but the rest of us want to be in control. And I've had questions for you each week, and we're going to continue with those questions, because if you're sitting there and you're skeptical, I don't know, maybe I don't think I'm really a control person. I'm not a control freak. I don't really even want control in my life. So here's some questions. Do you find yourself keeping others from feeling the pain of their choices? Do you want to keep your kids, your friends, your family members, people you care about, from feeling the pain of their bad decisions?
Ever having to deal with any consequences or anything?
Right.
Can you shield them from it if
Right.
possible, right? And do you sometimes, maybe all the time, a lot of times, have a kind of a curated image of yourself, that your appearance, that you allow for other people to be able to see, kind of the version that you want them to be able to see? Social media probably doesn't contribute to that in any way.
No way. But, no one's using filters, right?
Because if that's the case, then you might have some control issues, and maybe you're not even aware of it, or you don't realize it, or you think, well, that's not really me, like Jeff said.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us, maybe all of us, have a tendency to do these things from time to time. Maybe with certain groups of people, maybe not with everybody. But
right. How about this? Do you make financial security your highest priority? Do you maybe live miserly, or said in modern speak, are you a cheapskate? Rather than living generously, so that you always have enough money just in case anything that ever could go wrong, you won't feel it. Now, I'm not saying don't be wise with your money.
Yeah.
But it's having the money is where your safety is. Yeah. You might have an issue with control. So those are just examples of us trying to be in control of our lives. And that innate desire within us to be king. Last week, well, actually, in the first week, we talked about the first king of Israel, Saul, right? This man, God had made him king. God had said he is king, and Saul just couldn't accept it. So Saul had to, he kept putting on, I don't know, show is the right word, but he kept acting out of his insecurity so he could look like, in his mind, a king. So people would think he was a king. It didn't matter to him that God had said he was king, but he was so worried about what others thought, and his insecurity ultimately led to his own suicide and the death of his sons. It caused great pain on him and his family because of his insecurity, his desire to be in control. And then last week, we talked about David. David was the opposite of Saul. David lived a life, right? We talked about brokenness, surrender. David lived a life in full surrender to God. Not because he was innocent or that it was easy, right? We're going to talk about some messed up stuff David did in a little bit. But his regular operational approach was giving God control of his life, right? We discussed last week that suffering, right? We talked about what suffering is, brokenness, and surrender. And suffering is just the pain of everyday life, whether it's the pain that, or the suffering or the difficulties, the baggage that we get from our parents or whatever our upbringing was, or it's the physical pain of life because the older we get, the more things just keep going wrong, right? That's suffering. And suffering's also when we make mistakes or when we do wrong willfully, when we sin, right? Sin is disobedience to God and selfishness towards others. That causes us suffering.
Right, and David still experienced that. He still experienced suffering.
He did.
It's just his approach was different. His default setting, like you said,
Right.
something that he had predetermined. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, that he was going to surrender to God.
Right.
He responded differently than the other two that we're talking about
exactly.
in this series. So.
Really, we learn that surrender comes from our right approach or our right response to suffering. And ultimately, surrender comes from us coming to the end of ourselves and surrendering our lives to God, full reliance on God, giving him control. Me not being in control anymore, God being in control of my decisions, where I'm going, what I'm doing. So in this final week, and I know some of you sighed a sigh of relief, final week, Jeff being up here, bald head shining on me. Final week of this series, we're talking about the third king. The third king of Israel is Absalom. Absalom was king for a couple days, maybe a week of Israel, but he was king, and we're going to talk about him as the third king. Right, with David, with Absalom, he is the third son of David. And unfortunately, he's not like his father, right? Bad things happen in Absalom's life, and the way he responds is not God-honoring, right? Whether it's through bitterness, his desire to be in control, his pride, his arrogance, Absalom takes control, and he doesn't mind getting his hands dirty, is what we're going to learn from Absalom today.
No, he did not.
Right? He's not fleeing difficult situations and running towards God like his dad did. Absalom's taking them head on, and he's going to solve them in his own way. And really, like Saul, Absalom's going to end his life earlier than it needed to. And he's going to hurt those around him. And the truth is both of these men had the opposite of peace in their lives. And that's the one thing we see with David time and again is David had God's peace. Because God's peace is what we get when we give up control.
Yeah. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, well, that sounds really great. I wish I had peace like David did. And we're going to see a couple of stories today about how he showed a tremendous amount of peace in situations that I don't know if I would have been able to do, for sure. But maybe you're sitting there thinking, like, I don't know if I can have that. I don't know if that's possible for me. I wish that I had what he had. Well, let's not forget, right, that Jesus, when he was talking with his disciples, he talked about this topic and mentioned that he was going to be leaving them, but he was going to be leaving them with this level of peace. So in John chapter 14, verse 27, it says, I am leaving you with a gift. This is Jesus talking. I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid.
Right, this is Jesus talking to the disciples not long before he's going to go to the cross and be sacrificed up there for our sins and the sins of his disciples. He's going up there, and of course, Jesus knows he's going to get up out of that grave a few days later, but his disciples aren't going to know that. So he wants them to be prepared, but he also wants them to have the comfort that only actually that he can give. What our goal is today, what our focus is this morning, what we're going to try and achieve today, what my hope is that you walk out of here understanding, because I endeavor to understand this. I'm not going to pretend I have this all down. I don't. But the truth is our attempts to control our lives, whether it comes from our insecurities like Saul, or if it comes from our arrogant pride like Absalom, or our bitterness like Absalom, it ultimately leads to suffering and failure. Me trying to control, because I don't know about you, I can't control. But trying to control leads to suffering and failure, but surrender brings us peace, which is what leads to true freedom.
I think that's really counterintuitive to what we think most of the time, doesn't it?
It is. It turns.
We think that controlling things is the way to experience peace. It's like,
Right.
I'll be at peace if I know everything and if I can handle
Right.
everything. But actually surrendering is what provides peace.
yeah,
And that is biblical. We see that over and over and over again in the character stories of the
Right.
Bible.
We have the thought, if we can make it just perfect, if I can make everything perfect in this situation, then everything is going to be great. If I can get this all planned out and everything goes the way I think it should go, everything will be great. But I know for me, no matter how much I plan and try and control the situation, I botch it up. I was thinking through this topic, and I talk to my wife a lot. I'm a verbal processor, my wife Jennifer, and as I was talking through control, the reality is, I don't say this braggingly because I actually think this is a little more shameful. I don't know, not shameful is too strong a word, but I don't struggle real bad with giving God control of the big things in my life, right? Back in August, I'm in the hospital. I just had a heart attack. I wasn't too worried. I figured God had this in control. But the little things are the things I think I can control, right? We lived in Boston for a lot of years, and for about 6 years, I worked up in Lexington, Massachusetts, at Hanscom Air Force Base, and I lived in the town of Braintree where John Adams was born. Remember John Adams? And it's only 30 miles. It shouldn't be that big a deal to drive that. Well, it never takes 30 minutes to go 30 miles in Boston, except maybe at 3:45 in the morning, 4 a.m., something like that, maybe. Right? So it could take anywhere from an hour to 2, sometimes 3 hours to get to work and home from work.
That's ridiculous.
And every single day, especially in the afternoon, because I didn't care if I was late to work, but I wanted to get home. I mean, I had a good excuse if I was late to work.
I get it.
I left at 6:30. If I'm there by 8:30, they still can't complain. I left at 6:30. And my boss's boss had to sit in the same traffic, so I had to get covered. But on the way home, I wanted to get home quickly. There was this app back then. I don't even know if it works anymore. It's called NRIX. And you could look at NRIX and decide where's the traffic the worst and what's the quickest way to get home. This is before Google was very good at this.
Wow.
So this is a decade or more ago now.
They had apps.
Every day I would look at that app to find the fastest way home. And Jennifer was laughing at me last night, and she said it never helped you. I said, that's not true. I think 3 times, maybe 4 in those 5 years, it helped me. Right?
Wow.
I think I can control the little things, and all it did was lead me to stress and frustration. If I'd have just gotten on 128, which is the highway, the loop around the city, and just was content to sit there for 2 hours in a stick shift, what a moron I was.
Oh, that's rough.
I'd have had a whole lot more peace, but I was trying to control the situation. And right, I think a lot of us, maybe the big things aren't as hard, but at the very least, for a lot of us, the little things are what we try to control the most. And trying to control all the little things leads to a whole lot of misery.
Yeah,
it really
absolutely.
does.
So in order to tell the story of Absalom, there's a couple of stories about David that we have to tell. And so the first one is probably going to be, to a lot of people, a much more well-known story, something that maybe you've heard before, but maybe some of us have not heard it. And that is the story of David and Bathsheba, right? This is a situation where David, of his own poor choices and bad doing, he then tries to grasp control of something that is probably out of his control at this point. Spinning out of control probably would be a better way to describe it. And so this story is in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1. It says this: "In the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. Late one afternoon, after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. He looked out over the city. He noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. He sent someone to find out who she was, and he was told, 'She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite.'" So that should be the end of the story, right? Oh, some other guy's
Uriah
wife.
was one of his mighty men. It
Yeah,
should have been,
Uriah is a friend, somebody
Right.
he knows, somebody who's done a lot of hard work
And-
for him.
She was married. Yeah.
She's, married to somebody else. That's pretty much the end of the story. No, instead, then David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. And so that would be a bad enough end to the story, probably. Bad choice by David, does something he absolutely should not have done. But to make the problem worse, for David, I guess at least, she becomes pregnant. And David does not want for her husband, who's not him,
Right.
to find out that she has become pregnant. So he decides he's going to take care of this problem on his own. He's going to take control of a situation that is now out of his control because of his own doing. And so her husband, like Jeff said, is one of David's mighty men. So he is out on the battlefield, but he's giving directions, giving orders.
Right.
And so David sends word through a messenger to, "Hey, I want you to make sure that Uriah gets sent out to the front lines." That shouldn't be a big deal, right?
After he tried to get Uriah to come back and sleep with his
Yeah,
wife.
he
I
did
mean,
try to-
There was some
other-
shady stuff in there
Yeah,
in the
he's
middle.
like, "Well, if I can
Let's
get
make
them
this
to-"
your baby.
And he
Yeah.
refused. Yeah, right, because that's how it works.
David's not innocent, right? So if you've been hearing about David and thinking, well, I can't achieve that, well, guess what? David's not innocent. Keep going.
And it probably sounds like not a significant issue, right? If he's one of the best warriors, you would want him on the front line, right? But sending him to the front line is like saying, I want him to not make it home. Right? I want to make sure he doesn't come home, and I don't want to have to be the one that goes and does it.
Right.
And I don't want one of my people to be the one that has to go and do it. So please put him on the front line, make sure he doesn't make it home. And that's precisely what happens. Uriah is killed, and he does not make it back home. And so the prophet of the day, Nathan, he comes and he talks to David, and he tells him a parable about a man, a just kind of a made-up story of a guy who takes something that isn't his.
Right.
And David, in anger at the moment of this story, he says, well, that's terrible. That man should be punished for taking something that's not his. In fact, he says that man should be killed.
In some versions, it's like, you're that man. That was awesome.
Right, yeah. So
That's a good movie
Nathan's
line
like,
right there.
yeah, you're right. It's you.
Right.
You are the guy that took something that was not his. And so now God has judgment for you. But the interesting thing, the very cool thing about the story is the parable forces David to essentially indict himself, right? He sentences himself because as soon as Nathan is like, you know you did what we just talked about, David is like, oh, you're right. I'm the guy. I'm the one that did this terrible thing. And so this is the judgment that Nathan hands down from God in 2 Samuel 12. It says, why then have you despised the word of the Lord and done this horrible deed? For you have murdered Uriah the Hittite with the sword of the Ammonites and stolen his wife. From this time on, your family will live by the sword. That's a comment that's going to come back
that's coming.
in just a minute. Your family will live by the sword because you have despised me by taking Uriah's wife to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Because of what you have done, I will cause your own household to rebel against you.
And That's what happens pretty soon after this, and we're going to try and keep this as PG-13 as possible today.
Good luck.
Okay. As soon as that, soon after that happens, some period of time, David's oldest son Amnon is a little sick, and he's not real well. Anyways, we'll keep moving. Amnon decides that his half sister Tamar is really attractive, and he wants what he shouldn't have, and ultimately ends up taking from her what he shouldn't have taken from her. Right. Amnon rapes Tamar, and by the way, Tamar is Absalom's full sister.
Yeah.
And so Absalom gets pretty angry. But unfortunately,
Yes.
we see a new David after he runs, this situation happens with Bathsheba. It tells us that after he learned what Amnon did, David was very angry. And that's it. And David starts this new approach of passivity, and he doesn't deal with it. So even Absalom and Tamar have damage from their parents, right? So you might struggle with control today, or you have suffering in your life because of your parents or something they did or something from your childhood. Well, this is Absalom's story as well.
Yeah.
David doesn't act, so Absalom bides his time and makes up a reason for a feast to have all of his brothers. He tries to get David to come. David won't come. He gets all of his brothers for a feast, and then he tells his men, he doesn't even do it himself, he tells his men to kill his brother. And so Absalom causes Amnon's death, and then he flees to Geshur, where his grandfather is king, and he hides out there for 3 years. He lives in banishment, and David does nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And time goes on.
Yeah, so finally, Absalom does return. Someone convinces David to allow Absalom to return and come back to the city after 3 years have gone by. And David finally agrees to this, but he doesn't go and see him for another 2 years. He's like, fine, he can come back, but I'm not talking to him. I'm not going to visit him. I don't want him to see my face. So then Absalom, he has his servants burn the fields of David's nephew, Joab, who's a leader in the armies. And he does this essentially to force Joab to get David's attention. To say,
Right.
hey, I've been trying to reach out to you because I want to be able to see my father. I want to go see David. And he won't entertain anything. You won't listen to me. You won't send word back. So I'm going to take, again, action
Right.
into my own hands
Right.
and try to get your attention, which he does get his attention. And so David does finally go and visit Absalom, but the happy family reunion is short-lived.
It is. So 2 times now we see Absalom taking his problems into his own hands. Right? Last week saw David, who was hiding out in the cave. Saul came in to do his business, and David could have taken Saul's life, but he didn't. Why? Because that was God's anointed. That was God's responsibility. God was in control. And with Absalom, we see Absalom's in control. And Absalom, he's killing his brother. Now he's burning Joab's field just so he can get an appointment. I mean, that's some serious stuff. I mean, people leave me voicemails a lot, but burning down my yard, that would be pretty crazy. But that's Absalom's approach.
I wouldn't have to mow my grass, though.
That's true. Do you mow your grass?
I mean,
Yeah,
a few
Levi
times.
mows his grass.
That's true.
Anyways,
Most of the time he does. That's true. That's true.
It's good to have a son to mow
Have
your
children.
grass.
It's good. It's good.
Anyways, so Absalom, he decides, well, I'm going to take this into my own hands, right? He met with David. He didn't get what he was looking for. It clearly wasn't the meaningful experience that he had engineered. So he decides yet again to take things into his own hands. Now, something else in 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 25, it talks about how Absalom is the most good-looking dude in all of Israel.
Why do they? These 2 people in particular
right,
get that special
Saul
note.
in his day, Absalom in his day, 2 most good-looking dudes in Israel. Really, if you're a good-looking man in Israel at this time, you're making bad decisions.
I was going to say.
It's better to be a bald, ugly guy in Israel
I prove
than to
every
be
day.
the good-looking dude, right? It says about Absalom that his hair was the most amazing thing, and he'd have to cut it once a year because it just got so long and luxurious, and it would weigh 5 pounds. I don't know what 5 pounds of hair looks like, but that sounds like a lot of hair. I mean,
does sound like a
I
lot of
probably
hair.
cut off 5 pounds a year, but I don't know.
I don't. Okay.
You're not far behind, buddy.
Wow. All right.
I've just embraced it. All right. In 2 Samuel chapter 15, we see what Absalom does next. And as I've been saying week after week, we're jumping through this quickly because there's not enough time. I encourage you to read 1st and 2nd Samuel.
There's
There is
so much
so
story.
much to learn and so much to understand. And if you ever think the Bible is boring, right? If you've ever said that or heard someone say that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already talked about cheating on your
Right,
wife,
yeah,
right? Sleeping with
cheating.
another dude's wife this morning.
Uh,
We've talked about murder. We've talked about rape. We've talked about
Yeah.
revenge. If you think the Bible's boring, you're not reading it.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
should read it. Anyways,
Yeah.
2 Samuel, chapter 15, verse 1 says this. After this, Absalom bought a chariot and horses and hired 50 bodyguards to run ahead of him. He got up early every morning and went out to the gate of the city. When people brought a case to the king for judgment, right? They didn't have courts back then. If you had an issue, two people had a disagreement, right? If your neighbor built the shed too close to your property line,
Right,
you had to
yeah.
go talk to the king.
Or
You couldn't
burn your
go to the
fields,
court.
you know, whatever.
Right, burn your fields. I got a summons from Fairborn City Court yesterday. I got nervous for a little bit.
What'd you do this time?
Fairborn City Court sends you a summons for jury duty. I'm used to jury duty coming on an
yeah.
envelope.
Court
I
summons
can't
sounds
imagine
intense.
getting a summons in the mail. I don't know why I shared this, but it scared me
Yeah.
yesterday. I thought I was going to jail. I got a summons in the mail. It was crazy stuff. I've got an active imagination.
You do. He does.
It's just jury duty. Anyways, I should get back to
Which
what
might be
we're
worse,
talking
I don't
about. When people brought a case to the king for judgment, Absalom would ask where in Israel they were from. And they would tell him their tribe. Then Absalom would say, "You've really got a strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. I wish I were the judge. Then everyone could bring their case to me for judgment, and I would give them justice."
He's
right.
really good at that. We've already learned.
Yeah, he dishes out justice well. Right, I'm sorry, the king's too busy for you.
Yeah.
I wish I was king. I'd have time for you. Yeah, be careful anytime someone's saying stuff like that to you. Hey,
They don't have time for you.
Right,
Come see me.
I'd be a better friend to you than they are.
Right. Yeah.
But
It's like
unfortunately,
a person saying that they're humble. Like
oh yeah, I'm very humble.
I'm not sure that
I'm the
that's how
most
that
humble.
works, but-
I should get a T-shirt that says I'm humble. Yeah. Soon after, right? This goes on. Not soon after. This goes on for 4 years.
4 years.
I mean, Absalom plays the long game.
Yeah.
I'm going to make myself important. So for 4 years, he sits and does this. I mean, he paid 50 dudes for 4 years to just run ahead of his chariot. That's impressive. So for 4 years, then Absalom decides, all right, I'm ready to make this thing happen. So he gathers 200 officials from Jerusalem. They don't know what's going on. And then he goes to his dad and says, hey, can I go to Hebron and offer sacrifices? You know, Hebron, where David was crowned king. I'm just going there innocently to offer sacrifices to our God because I'm such a godly man. I want to go sacrifice to God. And he takes them, and then he calls for one of David's advisors, Ahithophel, and he crowns himself king in Hebron. I mean, David's still king, sitting in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And Absalom is going to handle things himself, right? He's going to get his hands dirty. Yeah, he's in control of his future. He's going to make things happen. I'm just going to say, I'm king, and I'm going to be king. And he thinks he can pull it off. And maybe he will.
Well, yeah, so he does this, and he begins to turn a bunch of people in his direction. A lot of people start
It says
thinking,
all of Israel.
Hey, yeah, he's the king now, I guess. So they're just operating that way. And so in 2 Samuel chapter 15, we see how David responds to this taking place. It says, a messenger soon arrived in Jerusalem to tell David, all Israel has joined Absalom in a conspiracy against you. Then we must flee at once, or it will be too late, David urged his men. Hurry, if we get out of the city before Absalom arrives, both we and the city of Jerusalem will be spared from disaster. We are with you, his advisors replied. Do what you think is best. So the king and all his household set out at once, and he left no one behind except 10 of his concubines to look after the palace.
So the most victorious king in
Yeah.
Israel's history, right?
He
He's
just-
won battle. The furious soldier that he is.
Right, took down Goliath, and
Right.
now he
He-
just leaves.
He just walks.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And so what something else that would have been typical practice at this time is that the priests would carry the Ark of the Covenant along with the king whenever he traveled, particularly if he was going into battle or something like that.
And the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just something Indiana Jones wanted. That was the presence
Right,
of God among the children of Israel.
Well, I mean, if you want to open the lid and take out the whole all your enemies,
that's
then
a
that's
good
all
way
you
to
do,
die.
I guess. No, that's a different story. But the Ark of the Covenant did, for the people of Israel, though, it did represent the very presence of God.
Right.
And so naturally, you would want that with you when you're traveling or when you're going into battle or something like that. And so it was very typical for the king to want that with him. But David does something interesting, and he instructs them to stop and take it back. So in 2 Samuel 15, verse 25, it says, "Then the king instructed Zadok to take the ark of God back into the city. If the Lord sees fit," David said, these are David's words, "he will bring me back to see the ark and the tabernacle again. But if he is through with me, then let him do what seems best to him."
That's the guy that was in the cave.
Yes,
That's the guy
absolutely.
who wouldn't kill Saul. That's the guy that knew that God was in control.
Right. He's completely open-handed with the kingdom that, by the way, God had promised to give to him, and that God had promised his descendants forever would continue to rule in this kingdom. Like, this was promised to him, and he just walks away from it. And he says, if God wants me to continue to be in this position, he will make it happen. And what I find, ironic is probably the wrong word, because if you don't believe that God is sovereign and in control of everything, then you may think this was ironic. But seriously, the ironic part here is that David's son Absalom is doing exactly what Saul feared David would do to him. Right? Even though David never actually did any of that. He never tried to take Saul's kingdom away from him. He never tried to take the throne. He had the opportunity to do so and didn't. Saul was constantly in fear that this was happening. And now David is actually experiencing this. And instead of fighting to keep it, which would have been the culturally acceptable thing to do, would have been completely normal for him to fight to put down this rebellion.
That's what Saul did.
It's definitely what his predecessor had demonstrated for him that you would try to do. He instead surrenders the outcome into God's hands, and he trusts that God will do what's best, that following his plan will be better than following his own plan.
It's such an incredible picture of surrender.
Yeah.
The story goes on that David sends back one of his advisors, says, hey, try and give this guy some bad advice. So if you think David just rolled over and did nothing, that's not true. Right? David was leaving this up to God, but he was still acting. Right? We talked about that last week. Surrender isn't just sitting down and say, okay, God, you take care of it all. No, surrender is, okay, God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
I trust how the outcomes are going to be. Let me act in the way that you'd have me act. So he sends back one of his advisors. The advisor gives him bad advice. Ahithophel hangs himself. Again, the Bible isn't boring. So Absalom is given the advice, hey, gather all the armies of Israel, all the tribes, the entire army of Israel, and then chase after David. And it doesn't say if that was a day later, 2 days later, a week later. I'm sure it took a little time. It takes a while to get those diesel trucks running and all. But, he gathers the army, and they head into the wilderness to go after David. And there's great stories in there how people have cared for David and people have been kind to David. And David's got his bodyguard. He's got other troops with him. He's got his mighty men. All right, so David's still someone to be concerned about. And they go out to battle, David's men against the rest of the army of Israel. And Absalom, it says he's riding on his donkey, which sounds less impressive than a horse, but he's riding on his donkey. And him and his beautiful hair, it's going to come back to bite him. You don't want to be a good-looking dude in Israel. Be an ugly bald guy. His hair gets caught in a tree, and he's left hanging in the tree by his hair. This pretty boy and his locks of hair hanging from a tree.
It's a wild thing to...
It's fascinating.
Trying to picture.
Now David didn't want them to kill his son, but Joab, who's caused David some headaches over the years, Joab's got another thing in mind. And a soldier sees Absalom and doesn't do anything, and in the end, Joab goes and he finishes off Absalom, and they throw him in a big pit and they pile rocks on him, and he is no longer in control. Absalom lived his life taking things into his own hands, and in the end, his death was not in his hands. his death was because of his hair hanging him in a tree.
Okay.
That's quite the picture, right?
Technically,
We want to
yeah.
be in control. I mean, the times I would sit in traffic and things would just get worse, and I was so angry.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I didn't have hair get caught.
It didn't help you to just get more mad about it?
It didn't help me to get more mad about it, but it didn't keep me from getting more mad about it. But Absalom's life comes to an end.
Yeah. And so David, and here's the thing, Jeff already mentioned earlier, you got to go into 2 Samuel, you got to read these stories because David's time away and his return covers like 4 chapters in 2 Samuel. We can't cover all of that. There are stories in there about David, being confronted by people who cursed him, people who had turned, and sided with Absalom. And, again, culturally acceptable thing for a king to be like, you can't talk to me that way. We're just going to get rid of you. And he doesn't do that. In fact, he instructs people, just leave him alone. Basically, David recognizing that, I deserve their disappointment. I have brought all of this onto myself. I've brought on to me the ire of the kingdom. I have brought onto myself my family to turn against me. I caused all of this. And if I do the right thing now, maybe God will restore me to the throne. Maybe he won't, but at least I will have done the right thing this time, and that's what I need to do. And so he is then, as a result of Absalom dying, he is able to return to his place as the king.
Right. So you see Absalom who takes control, right, whether it's from his own pain from the difficulties of his life, his own baggage from what his father did or did not do, or just his arrogance. Absalom takes control, but David lives that life of surrender. And right, he left Jerusalem and decided whoever God wants to be the next king, even if it's my terrible son, he can be the next king. David ultimately had peace in this absurd situation because of God. And Paul in there is no first Philippians. It is the first Philippians. Paul and Philippians say the same thing. You want to read that passage for us, Matt?
Yeah.
In Philippians chapter 4, Matt's going to read in a second. Paul is talking about peace. So go ahead.
Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything that we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about these things. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all that you learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you.
Paul summarizes what David has done. Now, again, Paul doesn't say anything in this passage about live perfect, do everything right, and things are going to work out. Paul doesn't say that. What Paul says is, right, don't worry about anything, pray about everything. Surrender to God, right? Worrying about things is usually tied to controlling things, right? Give God control. Live in surrender. Practically, God, daily, on a daily basis, praying, God, please take control of this situation. God, please lead me, guide me, direct me. That's surrender. God, I want your direction for my life.
It absolutely is a daily surrender. I don't know about you, but I know for me, I have to constantly be reminded or remind myself all the time that surrendering to God's plan isn't just for yesterday when I really needed it yesterday. It's also for today, because I will surrender control one day, and then the next day I will try to take some of it back. Right. And so this is a thing that happens all the time. I think of when my son was born, actually, he had a medical condition right after being born, and the hospital that we were in did not have the level of NICU that we needed in order to take care of him. And so we're being told, he hasn't even been born for hours yet, and we're being told that he's going to be transported away from us to another hospital, a different hospital with a higher class NICU and all the right stuff that they need.
Highfalutin, huh?
I guess, I don't know, whatever. But I'm faced with myself in particular with this choice. Do I stay here with my wife, and she had medically complex pregnancies and things like that, so do I stay with her and trust that God's going to take care of my son over in this other place, or do I go with him and trust that my wife Renee is going to be okay. Like, and I share that story not to be like, oh, great job, you made a really great choice. It's because like surrendering was literally the only option that I had. I had to trust him with one or the other. I couldn't
Right.
go to
So
both
which
places.
one did you like more?
Well, I didn't
That
really
isn't
know
what it
Levi
is.
that well yet, so no, no. Luckily, my mother, I believe, is the one that went with Levi to the other hospital, and I stayed with Renee. And she got herself forcibly discharged much earlier.
Forcibly,
than,
she took to arms.
She talked to the
She brought
nurses
arms.
and was
All right.
like, "You got to get me out of here." And they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna quick, rush the paperwork through." And she got out of there way faster than she should have. She was not in any condition to leave the hospital yet, but we did it, and we went over to the other hospital, and
That's
we
good.
sat there, and it was crazy. But it's just, again, I have to be sometimes forced into those types of situations.
Right.
It's like, you guess what? You're gonna trust me because neither one of these options are
Right.
particularly great.
Yeah.
You're gonna
You
have
don't
to
have a choice.
You're gonna have to trust.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
The second thing we see here in this passage, and we see in the life of David, right? It talks about in here focusing on the good things, focusing on what's right, what's pure, what's true, because truth, that's the word of God. Focusing on truth is what brings us daily peace. Daily peace, which leads to true freedom. Surrender to God, surrendering to God
Yeah.
brings us peace
Yeah.
and a life of freedom. We all want freedom, and we try and control our way into it. But as Paul says here, and as David lived out, the only way to have freedom is surrender to God.
Surrendering to God. Yeah. And it's the only way to experience that true freedom is through that peace. But again, like we said back at the very beginning, right? Jeff, you used a quote last week from Renew that, or maybe it was the first week.
It's first week.
What God says about us is true. It is true, regardless of whether we feel like it's true or not. And John chapter 14, verse 27, which we said back at the very, very beginning today, it communicates that same thing, right? That peace that that brings about the possibility for true freedom, it is at our access. Jesus said he is giving that to us. He didn't say maybe someday you could possibly have it, or if I really feel like letting you have some, I'll give you some, or if you're really, really good, then maybe you'll
Right.
be able to get it, or if you always choose the right things. David didn't do that.
Right.
He said, I'm giving you the peace that I possess, that the world that you live in is not going to understand, but I'm giving it to you. So we have it. It is at our
We
disposal.
do. And, if you're here today, if you're new to church or you've not been to church in a while, or you're trying to figure out this God thing, and peace sounds appealing, but you don't understand it. Well, Matt and I are going to be out at Next Step Central afterwards. We'd love to talk to you about starting a relationship with Jesus. It's not a complex thing. It's an easy thing to do. It's really just acknowledging that Jesus is God. And Jesus paid for our sin, big word for, little word for a lot of things that mean disobedience to God and selfishness towards others. And it's turning from that sin and putting our trust in Jesus that changes everything. Ultimately, as I said before, our attempt to control our lives, whether it's by insecurity, bitterness, arrogance,
Pride.
it leads, pride, thank you,
No, you're
to
good.
suffering and failure.
Every time.
But surrender, true surrender, surrendering to God brings us peace and freedom.
Yeah.
You're not free without peace. So with that peace that Jesus gives us, that's how we get true freedom in our lives. So giving up control actually gives us freedom. Losing control, actively giving it up.
Yeah.
Why don't you pray for us?
Absolutely.
Matt?
Yeah. Let me pray for us.